certain moments in broadcast television reveal fundamental truths about respect, boundaries, and the consequences that follow when individuals cross lines that should never be violated. The incident that transpired during a Family Feud taping in January 2025 would demonstrate the profound difference between legitimate criticism and personal attacks, between humor and cruelty, and between professional composure and the justifiable decision to refuse participation in one's own disrespect. When 47-year-old contestant Brian Mitchell made disparaging remarks about host Steve Harvey's wife Marjorie during what should have been light-hearted game show banter, he triggered a response that would establish important precedents about the limits of acceptable discourse and the importance of defending those we love from baseless attacks. The manner in which Mr. Harvey addressed this violation of basic decency, and the broader conversations it generated, would provide valuable lessons about maintaining dignity while establishing firm boundaries against disrespect. Viewers are encouraged to engage with this content by subscribing to the channel to access additional analyses of significant moments that illustrate principles of respect, appropriate boundaries, and the importance of defending personal honor without compromising professional integrity. The Anderson family from Phoenix, Arizona had traveled to Los Angeles to participate in Family Feud after winning their spot through the standard application process. Among their participants was Brian Mitchell, the husband of contestant Sarah Anderson Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell was a 47-year-old financial consultant who had built his career on analyzing business transactions and evaluating financial decisions. However, his professional expertise in financial matters had apparently fostered a cynical worldview that extended beyond appropriate professional context into personal judgments about others' relationships and motivations. What Mr. Mitchell could not have anticipated was that his decision to publicly characterize Mrs. Marjorie Harvey as a gold digger would not be received as humorous commentary, but as an unacceptable personal attack that would have immediate and lasting consequences. Stephen Harvey, at 67 years of age in January 2025, had achieved remarkable success across multiple entertainment domains including stand-up comedy, television hosting, radio broadcasting, and authorship. His professional journey from homelessness and financial struggle in his 20s to becoming one of the most recognizable and successful entertainers in America was well documented and frequently referenced in his public appearances. Mr. Harvey had been candid about his multiple marriages and divorces earlier in life, acknowledging mistakes he had made and lessons he had learned through difficult experiences. His marriage to Marjorie Bridges Harvey, which had endured for over 17 years at the time of this incident, represented what he consistently described as the most fulfilling and transformative relationship of his life. Marjorie Harvey was an accomplished individual in her own right, having established herself as a fashion influencer, philanthropist, and businesswoman before and during her marriage to Mr. Harvey. She had founded the Lady Loves Couture, a lifestyle brand focused on fashion and luxury living. She was actively involved in charitable work through the Steve and Marjorie Harvey Foundation, which provided mentoring and educational resources to young people. Mrs. Harvey had 3 children from a previous relationship whom Mr. Harvey had adopted and embraced as his own, demonstrating a blended family structure that both partners had worked deliberately to make successful and loving. Mr. Harvey had spoken publicly on numerous occasions about how his relationship with Marjorie had transformed his life. He credited her with helping him become a better man, encouraging his faith journey, supporting his professional endeavors, and providing the kind of partnership that had eluded him in earlier relationships. He had also been explicit about his intolerance for disrespect directed toward his wife, stating in interviews and public appearances that while he maintained professional composure in most circumstances, attacks on his family represented a boundary he was unwilling to compromise. Brian Mitchell presented a stark contrast to Mr. Harvey's expressed values regarding respect and appropriate discourse. Mr. Mitchell had established a reputation in his professional circles as someone who prided himself on telling it like it is, and who frequently characterized his blunt assessments as honesty rather than rudeness. Colleagues described him as intelligent and competent in financial analysis, but often insensitive in personal interactions. He had a pattern of making comments that he defended as jokes or observations, but that others experienced as hurtful or inappropriate. Mr. Mitchell's wife, Sarah Anderson Mitchell, was a 39-year-old nurse practitioner who had built a successful career in healthcare. She was well regarded by colleagues and patients for her compassion and clinical competence. Friends described Sarah as kind and diplomatic, often serving as a social buffer for her husband's more abrasive tendencies. She had developed strategies over their 15-year marriage for managing situations where Brian's comments created tension or offense, typically through apologizing on his behalf or reframing his statements in more palatable terms. The Anderson family also included Sarah's mother Patricia, her sister Amanda, and her brother David. All three family members had expressed private concerns to Sarah about Brian's communication style and his tendency to make comments that seemed designed to provoke or diminish others. However, they had maintained cordial relationships with him for Sarah's sake, choosing to overlook or minimize his more problematic statements in the interest of family harmony. The Family Feud production staff had conducted standard background screening for all participants, but had identified no specific concerns that would warrant excluding the Anderson family from participation. Mr. Mitchell's application materials and preliminary interviews had not revealed the extent of his tendency toward provocative commentary, and the family had presented themselves as enthusiastic participants eager for the game show experience. The taping had proceeded normally through the initial rounds. The Anderson family competed effectively, demonstrating good knowledge of common survey responses and maintaining appropriate energy and enthusiasm. Mr. Harvey engaged in his characteristic warm banter with family members, asking about their backgrounds, occupations, and interests. The atmosphere was positive and aligned with the show's typical tone of family-friendly entertainment. The situation began to deteriorate during a commercial break when Mr. Harvey was engaging in informal conversation with contestants, a common practice designed to maintain energy and rapport during technical adjustments. Mr. Harvey had made a self-deprecating comment about his fashion choices, referencing his well-known affinity for colorful suits and distinctive style. This type of humor was standard in his hosting approach and typically generated light-hearted responses from contestants. Mr. Mitchell, however, chose to respond with a comment that went far beyond appropriate banter. He stated loudly enough for the studio audience and production staff to hear that Mr. Harvey could afford to dress however he wanted because his wife had married him for his money, making her essentially a gold digger who would tolerate any eccentricity as long as the financial resources continued flowing. He then laughed at his own comment, apparently expecting others to find his observation amusing. The studio fell into uncomfortable silence. The Anderson family members looked horrified, immediately recognizing that Brian had crossed a serious line. Production staff exchanged concerned glances, uncertain how to proceed. Mr. Harvey's expression transformed from his characteristic warm smile to something much more serious and controlled. Those who had worked with Mr. Harvey extensively recognized the expression as one indicating that he was exercising considerable restraint to maintain professional composure rather than responding with the anger that such a comment would naturally provoke. Mr. Harvey addressed Mr. Mitchell directly, his tone measured but carrying unmistakable weight. He asked Mr. Mitchell to clarify what he had meant by the comment, providing an opportunity for Mr. Mitchell to recognize his error and retract or apologize for the statement. This approach reflected Mr. Harvey's extensive experience in managing difficult interpersonal situations and his preference for allowing individuals to correct their own mistakes before imposing external consequences. Mr. Mitchell, demonstrating either profound social incompetence or deliberate provocation, did not take the opportunity to apologize. Instead, he doubled down on his comment, stating that it was simply an observation based on the fact that Mrs. Harvey had married Mr. Harvey after he had achieved significant wealth and success. He characterized his statement as a neutral assessment rather than an insult, claiming that many people marry for financial security and that pointing out this reality should not be considered offensive. Mr. Harvey's response was immediate and unambiguous. He stated clearly that characterizing his wife as a gold digger was not a neutral observation, but a deliberate insult that questioned her integrity, misrepresented the nature of their relationship, and demonstrated profound disrespect for both Mrs. Harvey and for Mr. Harvey himself. He explained that his wife had her own accomplishments, her own resources, and her own integrity, and that reducing their relationship to a financial transaction was both factually incorrect and morally offensive. Mr. Harvey then articulated a principle that would resonate far beyond the immediate situation. He stated that, while he maintained professional composure in response to many forms of criticism or disagreement, attacks on his family represented a boundary he was unwilling to compromise. He explained that defending one's family from baseless attacks was not optional, but was rather a fundamental responsibility that superseded professional obligations or entertainment considerations. He informed the production team that he was leaving the set and would not continue hosting the episode while Mr. Mitchell remained present as a contestant. He stated that Mr. Mitchell had demonstrated such profound disrespect that continuing to facilitate his participation in the show would constitute acceptance of unacceptable behavior. He made clear that this was not a spontaneous emotional reaction, but rather a deliberate decision based on principles he had articulated clearly throughout his career. The production staff faced an unprecedented situation. In the history of Family Feud's decades-long run, a host had never left a taping due to a contestant's behavior. The standard protocols for managing contestant misconduct involved warnings, editing problematic content during post-production, or in extreme cases, removing individual contestants while continuing the taping. However, Mr. Harvey's decision to leave entirely created a situation that required immediate executive decision-making. Sarah Anderson, Mitchell was visibly distressed, her face flushed with embarrassment and her eyes filling with tears. She immediately began apologizing to Mr. Harvey, expressing that she was horrified by her husband's comments and that they did not reflect her values or her family's values. Her mother Patricia, sister Amanda, and brother David echoed these sentiments, making clear that they had not endorsed or anticipated Mr. Mitchell's disrespectful remarks. Mr. Mitchell, confronted with the serious consequences of his comments, attempted to characterize the situation as an overreaction to what he maintained was simply a joke. He stated that public figures should expect to receive criticism and commentary about their personal lives and that Mr. Harvey's response was disproportionate to a harmless observation. This additional commentary only reinforced Mr. Harvey's assessment that Mr. Mitchell lacked the self-awareness or moral compass to recognize the severity of his transgression. Mr. Harvey addressed the Anderson family members other than Mr. Mitchell, expressing that he held no ill will toward them and recognized that they were not responsible for Mr. Mitchell's choices. However, he maintained that his decision to leave the set was final, and that the taping could not proceed with the current participant configuration. He then exited the studio, leaving the production team, contestants, and studio audience to process the extraordinary situation that had just unfolded. The remaining Anderson family members faced a difficult decision. They could support Mr. Mitchell and leave together, or they could acknowledge that his behavior had been unacceptable and distance themselves from his actions. The decision they made would prove significant for their family dynamics and would be documented for the eventual broadcast of the incident. Sarah Anderson, Mitchell made a decision that would define the subsequent trajectory of events and would establish an important precedent about personal accountability and the limits of family loyalty. She stated clearly and publicly that her husband's comments had been completely inappropriate, that she did not share his cynical view of the Harvey marriage, and that she supported Mr. Harvey's decision to leave the set rather than tolerate disrespect toward his wife. She then asked the production team if it would be possible to continue the taping without Brian's participation, suggesting that another family member could take his position or that the family could forfeit and allow the opposing family to advance. Her willingness to publicly contradict her husband and to prioritize principles over family loyalty demonstrated moral courage that impressed those present and would later resonate with viewers who watched the edited episode. Patricia Anderson, Sarah's mother, supported her daughter's position and went further by directly addressing Brian. She stated that his pattern of making hurtful comments under the guise of honesty or humor had created problems in multiple contexts throughout his marriage to Sarah, and that this incident represented a culmination of behavior that the family had tolerated for too long. She expressed hope that the serious consequences he was now facing might serve as motivation for him to examine his communication patterns and make substantive changes. Amanda and David, Sarah's siblings, also expressed support for Sarah's decision and made clear that they found Brian's comments about Mrs. Harvey to be indefensible. The unified family response, with everyone except Brian recognizing the severity of his transgression, created a powerful moment that transcended the immediate game show context and spoke to broader questions about accountability and family dynamics. The production team consulted with network executives about how to proceed. After conferencing with Mr. Harvey, who had not left the building but had retired to his dressing room, a solution was proposed. Mr. Harvey would return to complete the taping on the condition that Brian Mitchell was removed from the set and that the Anderson family could either continue with a substitute participant or could choose to forfeit their position to the opposing family. Sarah chose to continue with her mother Patricia taking Brian's position in the game. This decision reflected both her desire to salvage what could be salvaged from the experience and her determination not to allow Brian's behavior to completely destroy an opportunity that the entire family had anticipated enthusiastically. When Mr. Harvey returned to the set, he received a standing ovation from the studio audience that lasted for over a minute. The audience's response reflected their appreciation for his defense of his wife and his refusal to accept disrespect even at the cost of professional convenience. Mr. Harvey acknowledged the applause with characteristic grace but redirected attention to the game and to the Anderson family members who had demonstrated integrity by acknowledging that Brian's behavior had been unacceptable. Mr. Harvey addressed the studio audience and the cameras directly before resuming the game. He stated that respect for family was not negotiable and that defending those we love from attacks was not optional. He explained that while public figures do face increased scrutiny and criticism, there are fundamental boundaries regarding personal attacks and baseless accusations that should be respected regardless of someone's public profile. He noted that characterizing someone's spouse as a gold digger without any factual basis constituted a form of character assassination that no one should be expected to tolerate. He also addressed the broader issue of how society had normalized certain forms of disrespect under the label of humor or honesty. He observed that calling cruel comments jokes did not eliminate their cruelty, and that claiming to simply tell the truth did not justify making statements designed primarily to hurt or diminish others. He encouraged viewers to examine their own communication patterns and to consider whether their words built others up or tore them down. The taping then resumed with the modified Anderson family configuration. The atmosphere remained somewhat subdued given the extraordinary events that had just transpired, but Mr. Harvey's professionalism and the family's determination to complete the experience with dignity allowed the game to proceed. The Anderson family ultimately lost their game, but they conducted themselves with grace and expressed gratitude for the opportunity to participate despite the disruption caused by Brian's behavior. Following the taping, Mr. Harvey spoke privately with Sarah and her family members. He expressed appreciation for their willingness to acknowledge that Brian's comments had been inappropriate and for their decision to prioritize principles over protecting someone who had behaved badly. He shared his own experiences of having to establish boundaries with family members whose behavior conflicted with his values and encouraged Sarah to consider whether Brian's pattern of disrespectful communication might warrant more serious intervention than she had previously considered necessary. The decision regarding whether to broadcast the incident involved extensive deliberation among network executives, legal advisors, and Mr. Harvey himself. Ultimately, the determination was made to air an edited version of the episode that included the essential elements of what had transpired while maintaining appropriate broadcast standards. The rationale for this decision centered on the educational value of demonstrating how public figures could establish boundaries against disrespect while maintaining dignity and the importance of showing that defending family was both justified and necessary. When the episode aired 6 weeks following the taping, the response was immediate and overwhelmingly supportive of Mr. Harvey's actions. Social media platforms were flooded with messages praising his defense of his wife and his refusal to continue hosting, while the individual who had insulted her remained present. The hashtag that emerged organically from viewer response emphasized the importance of defending family and establishing firm boundaries against disrespect. Mental health professionals and relationship experts utilized the incident as a teaching tool regarding healthy boundary setting and the importance of defending partners from attacks. They noted that Mr. Harvey's response demonstrated several important principles, including addressing disrespect directly rather than ignoring it, establishing clear consequences for boundary violations, maintaining composure while still communicating seriousness, and following through on stated boundaries rather than making empty threats. The incident also generated important conversations about the particular ways that successful women, especially women married to high-profile men, face baseless accusations regarding their motivations for marriage. Feminist scholars and women's advocacy organizations noted that characterizing women as gold diggers represented a form of misogyny that reduced women to mercenary motivations and denied their capacity for genuine love, partnership, and independent accomplishment. The fact that Marjorie Harvey had her own successful career and charitable work made the accusation particularly baseless and offensive. For Brian Mitchell, the consequences extended far beyond the immediate embarrassment of being removed from a game show taping. The incident became widely known in his professional and social circles, generating significant reputational damage. Several clients of his financial consulting practice expressed discomfort continuing to work with someone who had demonstrated such poor judgment and lack of respect, resulting in lost business relationships and reduced income. Friends and professional contacts distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the negative attention and the revelation of behavior patterns many had noticed but had previously minimized or tolerated. Most significantly, the incident served as a catalyst for serious reconsideration of his marriage. Sarah Anderson, Mitchell, supported by her family and encouraged by professional counseling she sought following the incident, recognized that Brian's comment about Mrs. Harvey represented not an isolated mistake, but rather a pattern of disrespectful communication that had characterized their entire relationship. She had spent 15 years managing Brian's tendency toward hurtful comments, apologizing for his behavior, and convincing herself that his positive qualities outweighed his communication deficiencies. The public nature of the incident and the serious consequences it generated forced Sarah to confront what she had been avoiding acknowledging for years. She could not continue to minimize or excuse behavior that others immediately recognized as unacceptable. Within 3 months of the Family Feud incident, Sarah filed for separation and began divorce proceedings. Her decision was supported unanimously by her family members, who had been concerned about the relationship for years but had respected her autonomy while hoping she would eventually recognize the problems they observed. The incident also generated important conversations about gender dynamics in relationships and the often invisible emotional labor that partners, particularly women, perform in managing and compensating for their spouse's behavioral deficiencies. Relationship counselors noted that Sarah's pattern of apologizing for Brian, reframing his comments, and managing social situations to prevent his behavior from causing problems represented a form of emotional work that had likely been exhausting and ultimately unsustainable. Harvey received widespread praise for his handling of the situation, but he was characteristically measured in his response to the acclaim. In interviews following the incident, he emphasized that he had simply done what any spouse should do when their partner is attacked unjustly. He noted that defending Marjorie was not heroic, but was rather a basic expectation of marriage and partnership. He expressed hope that the incident would encourage others to establish similar boundaries in their own relationships and to refuse to tolerate disrespect directed at those they love. Mrs. Marjorie Harvey addressed the incident publicly in a carefully crafted statement that demonstrated both grace and strength. She thanked her husband for his defense of her honor while noting that she had long since stopped allowing the opinions of strangers or the baseless accusations of those who knew nothing about her to affect her sense of self-worth. She stated that she knew the truth of her relationship with her husband, knew the foundation it was built upon, and needed no validation from others regarding the authenticity of their partnership. She also addressed the broader issue of how society treats women, particularly successful women in high-profile relationships, with suspicion and cynicism. She noted that men who marry successful women are typically celebrated as secure and enlightened, while women who marry successful men are often subjected to accusations of mercenary motivations. She encouraged women to refuse to internalize these double standards and to recognize that genuine partnerships involve mutual support, shared values, and authentic connection that transcends financial considerations. 6 months following the incident, Family Feud aired a special segment featuring interviews with relationship experts, communication specialists, and individuals who had experienced similar situations involving family members whose disrespectful behavior had created crises. The segment explored themes of boundary setting, the difference between honest communication and cruelty disguised as honesty, and the importance of defending family while maintaining personal dignity. The segment also included a brief interview with Sarah Anderson Mitchell, who had agreed to share her perspective on the condition that it might help others recognize problematic relationship patterns earlier than she had. She discussed how the public nature of the incident had forced her to confront what she had been denying for years, and how the support she received from strangers who recognized the unacceptability of Brian's behavior had validated concerns she had been suppressing. She encouraged viewers who found themselves constantly apologizing for or managing their partner's inappropriate behavior to seek professional guidance and to consider whether they were accepting unacceptable treatment in the name of loyalty or commitment. 1 year following the incident, the episode remained among the most discussed and analyzed moments in Family Feud history. Academic researchers studied it as an example of effective boundary setting and crisis management. Communication courses incorporated it into curricula addressing respectful discourse and the limits of acceptable commentary. Professional organizations focused on workplace communication utilized the incident to discuss the difference between constructive feedback and personal attacks. Mr. Harvey reflected on the incident during interviews promoting various projects over the subsequent years. He consistently maintained that leaving the set had been the right decision, and that he would make the same choice again without hesitation. He noted that the incident had reinforced for him the importance of establishing clear values and being willing to enforce them, even when doing so created professional or financial costs. He observed that integrity required consistency between stated values and actual behavior, and that defending his wife from baseless attacks was entirely consistent with the values he had articulated throughout his career. The broader cultural impact of the incident extended across multiple domains. Entertainment industry professionals recognized that the incident had established an important precedent regarding the limits of what hosts should be expected to tolerate from contestants. While game shows traditionally emphasized creating entertaining television even when contestants behaved problematically, the incident demonstrated that there were boundaries that should not be crossed, and that maintaining those boundaries sometimes required halting production entirely. Corporate training programs incorporated the incident into modules addressing workplace respect and appropriate communication. The recognition that characterizing colleagues, spouses with terms like gold digger would be completely unacceptable in professional contexts generated discussions about why such comments should be equally unacceptable in entertainment or social contexts. The incident helped establish clearer expectations regarding respectful discourse across multiple settings. Faith communities utilized the incident to discuss biblical and theological principles regarding defense of family, appropriate boundaries, and the balance between forgiveness and accountability. Religious leaders noted that while forgiveness remained spiritually important, it did not eliminate natural consequences of disrespectful behavior or require continued relationship with individuals who refused to acknowledge wrongdoing or modify harmful patterns. The conversations helped many individuals understand that establishing boundaries was compatible with spiritual maturity and that defending loved ones from attacks constituted appropriate stewardship of relationships rather than vindictive retaliation. 5 years following the incident, researchers conducted comprehensive analysis of the long-term impacts on all parties involved. Mr. Harvey had continued his successful career across multiple platforms, with his willingness to defend his wife having enhanced rather than diminished his public standing. Mrs. Marjorie Harvey had expanded her business ventures and philanthropic work, demonstrating the baselessness of accusations that she was dependent on her husband's resources or reputation. Sarah Anderson Mitchell had successfully completed her divorce and had rebuilt her life with clear boundaries regarding the treatment she would accept in relationships. She reported significantly higher life satisfaction and described the Family Feud incident as a painful but ultimately transformative catalyst that had freed her from a relationship that had been eroding her self-respect and emotional well-being. Brian Mitchell had experienced lasting professional and personal consequences from his behavior. Beyond the immediate reputational damage and relationship losses, he faced ongoing challenges related to the public record of his disrespectful behavior. Potential employers, clients, and even dating partners conducting standard internet searches would encounter extensive documentation of the incident, creating persistent obstacles to rebuilding his reputation and relationships. The lasting lessons from the incident resonated across demographic and cultural boundaries. The importance of defending those we love from baseless attacks. The necessity of establishing firm boundaries against disrespect, the recognition that calling something a joke did not eliminate its capacity to harm, and the understanding that integrity sometimes requires costly decisions all emerged as central themes that viewers internalized and applied to their own circumstances. Viewers are encouraged to reflect on their own communication patterns and relationship boundaries. Do we defend those we love when they are attacked unjustly, or do we remain silent to avoid conflict? Do we establish clear boundaries regarding the treatment we will accept, or do we tolerate disrespect in the name of politeness or family harmony? Do we recognize the difference between honest communication and cruelty disguised as truth-telling? These questions matter because the answers we provide through our actions shape the relationships we maintain and the lives we construct. Viewers are invited to subscribe to this channel to access additional content examining important narratives that illuminate principles of respect, dignity, and appropriate boundary setting. Sharing this content with individuals who might benefit from these lessons is encouraged to build communities that value respectful discourse and genuine honor for all individuals regardless of their relationship to wealth or public prominence. The narrative of Steve Harvey leaving the Family Feud set after a contestant called his wife a gold digger transcended its origin as a game show disruption. It became instructional material regarding appropriate defense of family, a demonstration that certain boundaries should never be compromised regardless of professional or financial considerations, and a reminder that respect for others' relationships and families represents a fundamental requirement of civilized discourse. Brian Mitchell's apparent belief that characterizing Mrs. Harvey as a gold digger constituted acceptable humor or legitimate observation revealed not sophisticated analysis but profound moral failure and social incompetence. Harvey's willingness to leave the set and refuse to continue hosting demonstrated that defending one's spouse from baseless attacks was not optional but represented a core responsibility that superseded entertainment considerations. The support Mr. Harvey received from millions of viewers illustrated that communities still recognize and applaud individuals who stand firm on principles, even when doing so creates short-term costs or complications. The genuine lesson from this significant incident is that the relationships we claim to value must be defended when they are attacked, that boundaries we establish must be enforced consistently, and that integrity requires alignment between our stated values and our actual choices when those values are tested. That is the legacy of the day Steve Harvey left the Family Feud set rather than tolerate disrespect toward his wife. That is the lesson all individuals should integrate into their understanding of what it means to honor the commitments we make and defend the people we love.